Hi, this is Nahid, and welcome to Improving Stressful Relationships. Today we're going to talk about setting good boundaries. Most people have heard of boundaries, but when it comes to actually knowing whether or not they have good boundaries and how to strengthen them when they don't, can just get confusing. The most important thing to remember is the stronger and thicker your boundaries are, the closer and more intimate your relationships can be. And that can be hard to get your brain around. So that's what we're going to clear up today. Let's start with an internal barometer. If you think about the relationships in your life, there are probably a few people that you feel completely comfortable being yourself with. But there are likely other people that you monitor your behavior with. You could be monitoring your behaviors so not to trigger something in them. For example, you might discover you're trying to keep them happy or prevent them from seeing something in you they can make fun of. There may be certain people you feel completely drained by, and you're always trying to find ways to limit your time with them. There may be others you feel like you never get enough time with, and you find yourself frustrated or hurt and not wanting to show it. It's more work to be around people when your boundaries aren't as strong, because you spend a lot more energy trying to manage your emotions around them, whether it's impatience, anxiety, or hurt. Our goal in strengthening your boundaries is to help you feel like you can be your natural self in your relationships and trust that when issues arise, they can easily be resolved. The best explanation of boundaries that I've been able to find is that boundaries are about responsibility. You want to ask yourself, in any relationship, who is responsible for each other's thoughts, feelings, and behavior? You might immediately say to yourself, well, that's obvious. I'm responsible for my thoughts, feelings, and behavior, and others are responsible for their thoughts, feelings, and behaviors. And that's true. It's the exact right answer. So it's a great description of nice, healthy, strong boundaries, and knowing that kind of helps you see all the areas where you're not even close to doing that. I find that the relationships where boundaries issues show up the most are things like parent-child relationships, where the parent really is responsible for the child in many ways. Also in boss-employee relationships, where you have the same thing. As a boss, I'm responsible for what happens on my team. If you're a leader in an organization and maybe you get accused of being a micromanager, that's a boundaries issue. If you've heard the phrase helicopter parent, that's also a boundaries issue. Both, both of those issues come from a parent or a manager taking too much responsibility for the thoughts, feelings, and behaviors of those they feel they're responsible for. But at the other end of the spectrum, when we find ourselves furious at our bosses, for example, for not caring enough about us or not providing us with enough guidance or mentoring, that would be us making them responsible for our thoughts, feelings, and behaviors. So this kind of thing shows up everywhere. And it's one of the key underlying dynamics that plays out in ongoing and often exhausting drama between people. Let's take a look at this model I call the spectrum of responsibility. If I'm on the far left side, I'm taking responsibility for my own and other people's thoughts, feelings, and behavior. Usually I'm feeling drained and exhausted because I don't trust others to do their part. I may, if I'm a manager, feel overly compassionate when people on my team have difficulties and jump in to do their work for them. I may choose not to give specific people on my team negative feedback because I'm afraid of hurting their feelings. I call this a spectrum because at the far extreme of taking responsibility for everything and everyone, you show up as an exhausted micromanager or as a helicopter parent. But as you move towards the center, what shows up is a lot of empathy and caring and compassion, and those characteristics make you an excellent manager and an excellent parent. So these qualities of empathy and caring and compassion only cause problems when they're taken to an extreme. Let's look at the other end of the spectrum. If I'm at the extreme right end of the spectrum, I'm angry, resentful, or hurt at others for what they did to cause my current situation. A good example is when I get angry at a peace officer for giving me a speeding ticket, or with my husband for not bringing me flowers. You may blame management or the government or even your kids for your financial situation. And while you're feeling resentful, powerless, and angry, you show up to others as whiny and complaining and negative. You may even be seen as a victim. But again, as you move towards the center of the spectrum, you'll see some excellent qualities. A certain level of autonomy and detachment from other people's opinions, a willingness to tell your truth, even if other people disagree, and the courage to stick by decisions that you make, even if you get a lot of pushback from others. And this confidence and courage makes a great manager or parent. I'd like you to take a minute and consider how this spectrum applies to you. Think about when you're in the middle of the spectrum and how that feels. In this area, you have compassion for others, but you also feel free to voice your opinions. You give to others, but you're also willing to receive. You have expectations and you lean on people. And at the same time, you can confidently work through the inevitable mistakes and disappointments that happen just because we're human. To make this more tangible, let's go through some examples and things people say and the subtle differences in wording that show up when we have stronger or weaker boundaries. Let's start in the left column here with "she's trying to control me." You may often hear husbands refer to their wives as balls and chains. There are a lot of unsaid expectations in marriage and other close relationships. So if you're on the receiving end of these expectations and you feel guilty, it can feel like the other person is trying to make you feel guilty or control you through guilt. When we actually believe someone is trying to control us through guilt, we've slipped to the you side of the boundary spectrum, and we're likely to run the other way, which just makes things worse. A cleaner way to describe the situation, on the right column here, is that her behavior feels manipulative to me, but I make my own choices. What that does is give you a clearer picture of what's going on, and it helps you get back in touch with the freedom you know you have, which might make you a little more inclined to lean into the relationship and have an honest conversation about expectations as opposed to running the other way. The next one, we've probably all been in situations where the behavior of others has embarrassed us. That's a clue that we're making their behavior a reflection of who we are. But there's definitely a social precedent for this. Parents are often blamed for the behavior of their children. If you bring a friend to a party and they make a scene, others at the party will likely see you as partly responsible. If you refer a professional to a friend or neighbor and then they do a horrible job, that can feel like it's partly your responsibility too. But the truth in all of these situations is that your part of this, it shows up in your judgment calls and how you handle the situations when they arise. So for example, if your child misbehaves in a restaurant and you completely ignore it, people are much more likely to blame you than if they see you taking the child out of the restaurant immediately. So they're really judging you on how you're handling the situation, not just on how your child's behaving. Same thing if you had a friend at a party. If your friend acted out and then you just walked away, maybe left the party, your friends would judge you one way. But if you actually maybe have the courage to confront your friend or bring them away from the party, your friends would judge you another way. Let's look at some of these others. She knows how to push my buttons. He drives me crazy. She hurt my feelings. When you feel that other people have done these things to you, you're making them responsible for your feelings. Other people can trigger you. They can trigger your own reactions, as we've talked about in prior classes, but they aren't responsible for your reactions. So it's better to think of it in terms of his behavior triggers me over here on the right, and I need to find a way to protect myself from that kind of stress. Or another example might be, I feel hurt by what she did. And just that subtle difference in phrasing, she hurt my feelings versus I feel hurt by what she did, shows that you're taking ownership of your own feelings. Now we get to some of the over-responsible types of things that we say. He or she can't mess up, or I'll look bad. This department is my responsibility. I can't let substandard work go out, so I'll need to redo it. It's my job to make sure my kids get good grades and get into a good school and get a good job. So all of these phrases show somebody taking too much responsibility for other people. Some other ways that you could phrase these things. This department is my responsibility. I'll teach and coach to the best of my ability, and when we make mistakes, we'll learn from them. And I'm strong enough to accept the consequences of their mistakes. Or as a parent, it's my job to teach my kids by modeling my values and work ethic and supporting them and taking ownership of their lives. So this is a lot easier said than done, but the wording, even though it seems subtle, can make a huge difference. Making these shifts can seem like a lot of work, and they do take a lot of self-awareness, but it's completely worth it. When you have clean and strong boundaries, you feel completely free and powerful in your relationships. And those feelings actually allow you to be more of your real self when you're with people. And that brings you closer, but closer without the weight that comes from unspoken expectations, embarrassment, or worry. Having clean and strong boundaries feels like other people can't hurt you, even with their bad behavior, because their behavior is not a reflection on you, and you feel completely empowered to have conversations with them about expectations. Other people can't make you do anything for the same reasons. You make your own choices, and if you feel that push or pull or guilt, you feel completely empowered to have a conversation about expectations and make some agreements. Other people's behavior isn't a reflection of who you are. You're going to use your best judgment, you're going to make the best decisions, and when they act in a way that feels a little bit embarrassing, you're going to handle that situation. You don't need other people to meet your needs, not because you're not going to get your needs met from other people, but because you're not going to focus in on one person and make them responsible for your needs. And you feel confident that you can depend on others to get your needs met. I usually start people off doing boundaries work by having them imagine that they have a magic wand and they get to make up the ground rules for how everybody interacts with them. Then I have them write a list. Here are some examples. Nobody's allowed to raise their voice at me. They should trust that I have good intentions, and if I do something that upsets them, they'll give me the benefit of the doubt, and then they'll talk with me. You can also make up a rule about how you'll behave. When people don't meet my expectations, I'll take responsibility for making my requests more clear. If my kids leave clutter all over the house, I'll ask them 3 or 4 times, and if they don't respond, I'll take the clutter and I'll throw it in their rooms. Not dramatically, of course. That would not be clean boundaries. The drama is a sure sign that the boundaries are messy. The thing about writing a list of your rules is that you don't have to know how you'll enforce your rules. You just need to be really clear on what is acceptable to you and what is not acceptable to you. And what I've found with the clients that I've worked with is that when something is not acceptable, and you're so clear in your head that that's not acceptable, then something happens in your demeanor when you're interacting with people because you're clear in your head that this isn't acceptable. And so you tend to say something in a tone of voice that's more confident than you might otherwise. A lot of times people allow people to cross their boundaries because they're not really clear that that's not okay. So they just feel weird, but they don't have that crystal clarity. So writing a list gives you that clarity. So if you'd like, you might want to take a few minutes to pause the video right now and make an initial draft list of some boundaries. If you'd like to take this deeper, one book I recommend is The 4 Agreements by Don Miguel Ruiz. Think of agreements as rules or boundaries. While he doesn't really use the word boundaries to explain his concepts, everything about the book moves you to the center of the boundary spectrum by helping you think more clearly about what you control in your relationships and what belongs to other people. And that allows you to let go of what belongs to other people. So since none of us will have time later, I'm going to ask you to open your email program now and write me an email. My address is here on the screen, nahid@coachnahid.com, and you can make the subject relationship class. Then I'd like you to answer 2 questions. The first is, what was the most valuable thing you got out of the class today? And maybe add what you're committing to do about it. The second is, what is a relationship challenge that you're currently facing that you'd like to see me cover in an upcoming class? Be sure to give some background details so that if I choose your question, others will be able to imagine themselves in your shoes. If you enjoyed this class, you're welcome to share it with anyone you'd like. In fact, I'd love the exposure, so please feel free to post it on social media and share what you loved about it. If you're watching this video because someone sent you the link and you're not yet on my email list, simply go to coachnahi.com and opt in when invited. That way you'll get all the classes in sequence and not miss out on the more in-depth explanations of each of the models. And finally, if you'd like coaching or more in-depth support when it comes to putting these tools and techniques into action, feel free to request a coaching consultation. We work with people individually, in small groups, and in organizations, so there's sure to be a format that works for you. Thanks for participating, and don't forget to send that email so I can be sure to address your specific issues. Take care, and see you next time.